Hello and welcome to this episode of Demystified as we explore home cooking in a modern world. Hi, I'm Linda McGowan, and in this episode of Demystified it's all about rice and legumes. Hi, I'm Linda McGowan and I'm sitting here with Paul Mounsey, and we're from Demystified, where we tackle home cooking in a modern world. And today I'm going to talk to Paul about rice and legumes and how to cook them in our steam and combi steam oven. So hello, Paul.
Hello, Linda. Just want to ensure that your phone's on silent.
Oh, I checked. It is. Thank you. Paul, one of the topics that I see we get a lot of queries about from our community and the steam and combi steam oven cooking is about how to cook rice and how to cook chickpeas and legumes, and what does it mean in a steam oven context. So could you please elucidate for us? I know it's a big word, I know it's late in the day, but could you have a chat about that?
If I knew what elucidate meant, I probably could. All right, so let's start with rice. So probably the most common, I don't want to say mistake, but error people make is that they think because they have a steam oven and that it steams things that it will automatically steam rice. Now that is partially true, but the methodology behind cooking rice in a steam oven is no different to what you would do on your stovetop. So the theory then is why would you do, or the question is, why would you do it in your steam oven? So there are benefits to both versions of cooking: a more traditional stovetop cooked rice, as in absorption method, versus doing the same method in your steam oven. If you were to ask me on a day-to-day basis how I'm going to cook my rice, it will always be on my induction cooktop. And the only time that I will go at it with my steam oven, and I'm talking just general, like a jasmine rice or a long grain white rice to serve as a side dish. If I was to do that and I needed volume and big volume, then I'll go to my steam oven to do it.
That's interesting because when I first made risotto that first time, I was a bit skeptical. I thought risotto, what difference would a steam oven make? Until I made it in our steam oven, our combi steam oven. And I think I wrote about this in one of our blogs, that I couldn't believe the time I had extra, because I wasn't stirring it, but it seemed to cook it in a more gentle, consistent flavour as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're talking about a different grain again, and those of you that know us, our website, our cookbook, anything like that, you'll note in the recipes, in any of the risotto recipes, we start in a more traditional manner. So we actually start our rice on the cooktop and we finish it on the cooktop. Yeah. And what we do in the middle part, where you would be stirring for 20 minutes, is we actually let the steam oven do the work for us. So it's not a traditional method. Am I, from my deepest heart's perspective, do I think it's right? Probably not. Do I think it's convenient and gives you an excellent result? Absolutely. So it's really a question of applying the right tool at the right time. So
it's a phrase I've heard you use before, Paul.
Yeah.
Yes.
So like for something like risotto, we use the steam oven in that middle section to essentially gently, slowly cook our rice. We also, and this is this is a term that I have coined and don't use very often, but I call it indirect steaming. Essentially, where, as you would know, Linda, we start our rice in a traditional manner on a stovetop. We saute our onions, garlic, then our rice. We do the white wine thing. We reduce that down, and then at that point we add pretty much all of our stock for the entire recipe at once. But then what we do is put a lid on it, and we put a lid on it because in a steam oven there is a certain amount of pressure that's created from the steam within the steam oven, and we're talking about steam only cooking. So we use the pressure that's created from the steam inside the oven to essentially cook our rice. So it isn't direct steaming like we would a piece of fish, where we're using the steam inside the cavity as our cooking medium. We're more using the pressure inside the cavity that steam creates as a gentler cooking medium, so as not to, really damage the grain, hurt the grain. So if you think about, let's say, general long grain rice on your cooktop, if you try absorption method, which means bring your rice to the boil, generally it then says, or the packet will tell you to lower the temperature to its lowest setting, so you're not boiling the rice. So essentially we're following that same procedure. We're not boiling the rice, we're actually cooking it at a gentler temperature in an enclosed environment, just using the pressure of the steam inside the cavity to look after the grain itself, but also cook it. So it's a time-saving effort, number one, but it also, time-saving is probably the big tick for it, but it also gives you as close to a good end result as what you would get. The difference being is because we're not agitating the rice, specifically in the case of risotto, we're not agitating it, therefore we're not getting the starch out of it, therefore you're not getting that really creamy end result. But what we do is work on that after that sort of middle cooking period. So our risotto, most risotto arborio rice, any risotto short grain rice that you would use for risotto, relies on that constant stir to get the starch out, which gives you that creamy mouthfeel. And what we do is just use a section of the middle part of the cook where we don't do that, but what we do is finish it at the end and get that creaminess back into it. So is it traditional? Not in the truest sense of the word, but does it give you a good 20 minutes? You've got a risotto on your bench without having to do any work, so you can go and put the clothes in the wash and do whatever when you get home from work. Yeah, I mean, it's as good as you're going to get.
Okay. And if you're adding meats or proteins and vegetables to the rice in that cooking time as well, would you do it at the beginning, in the middle?
It totally depends on what you add. So another topic that we've discussed before is colour equaling flavour.
Yes.
So let's say you're doing a mushroom risotto. Okay, mushrooms, although they don't take a long time to cook, they can withstand a longer cook at a lower temperature. So from a mushroom perspective, let's say I would probably sweat, saute, colour my mushrooms pre my starting the risotto and set them aside, and then maybe towards the end I would add them and stir them through just to re-warm them. A protein like chicken or prawn or anything like that, it depends on the protein. We don't want to be in a situation where we're cooking our protein for 20 minutes if it doesn't require it. Certainly a prawn doesn't require it. So, all those things are done towards the end. I mean, originally, as you would know, when you and I were doing research about combi steam ovens and what information was on the internet, we saw a whole heap of different, and I put in inverted commas, chefs from various brands loading a whole heap of ingredients and vegetables and rice into a tray, covering them with stock and putting them in the oven, and what was produced was, for want of a better term, absolute stodge. So hence why I've taken the more traditional method of starting the rice traditionally and ending it traditionally, and just using the middle part of, and using the oven more as as a tool, rather than a cooking vessel, if you like. It's just doing the work for us in the middle section. So yeah, adding things to it, you just think about what you're adding and how much cook time that needs. If you want to add chicken, maybe you slice the chicken super thin and you just toss it, set it in the pan and at the end before you finish off with your butter, parmesan and maybe a little bit more stock. Maybe that's the best way to go about it.
I think that brings up another topic which we'll address on another episode of Demystified, but the rise of one-pot cooking, which I'm not a fan of, and I don't think you are either, as much for what they are.
I'm not anti it.
I'm not anti it, but I don't think it's a panacea that we see a lot of videos on combi steam cooking particularly, saying, hey, you can put everything in at once and it's fantastic. And as we know, that doesn't always produce the best result. But another topic for another day. So I think that's rice kind of covered. And I always learn something when you're talking, Paul. I always pick up something that I haven't thought of before. But legumes and chickpeas and... Are they legumes?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Chickpeas and legumes and...
beans, lentils, anything
lentils,
like that. Yeah, so that's a good use of your combi steam oven. The trick there for new players is that you still need to add water. And you still need to soak them. You can get away with some, split peas and things that don't need to be soaked. You'll always get a better result if they are soaked, essentially rehydrated. But also the other trick, and for those of you that know our recipes, I have two favourite seasonings in the world. One is sea salt and one is extra virgin olive oil. Do not, under any circumstances, attempt to season something like a chickpea, a lentil, or anything pre-cooking. So, because what it actually does is puts a almost like a film around the legume or the chickpea or the lentil or whatever it is we're talking about, and prevents it from cooking. And it will eventually cook, but it'll take almost double the amount of time to cook. So even if you were doing it a traditional method on your stovetop and you had your chickpeas going and you were cooking them in water and you'd seasoned that water, those chickpeas would take twice as long as if you hadn't seasoned them. So although
there's a couple of bad recipes in the past.
Although I'm all for seasoning, there's always a rule, that you will discover, and for new players that's a good one to know, because although the convenience of things like canned chickpeas are there and they're good and they're convenient and all the rest of it, if you actually go and buy quality chickpeas and cook them yourself, the taste difference is extraordinary. So the taste that you get from chickpeas in a can to chickpeas that you actually buy dried and cook for yourself, and you spend some reasonable money on them. It's like anything with ingredients. The better you buy, the better end result you get. But something like a chickpea, most people will look at it and go, oh yeah, whatever. But it is absolutely extraordinary. They have in the case of a chickpea, you'll get like this nutty flavour that the can just doesn't produce. So although the cans do have, a convenience factor about them, and yes, they're good, you can whip up a hummus in 5 minutes, doing it yourself, and I'm a big advocate for doing it yourself, doing it yourself will give you far more options for what to do with something as basic as a chickpea or a lentil.
That's interesting, because I've sort of not really eaten them much when I've been cooking at home, because to me those canned varieties are a bit tasteless. They serve a purpose and they might bulk you up and fill up a dish, but there isn't a lot of flavour to them. Yeah,
and the good thing about something like, a chickpea, a bean, a lentil, anything like that, is that they do have the ability to absorb some flavour, especially over a long, slow cooking process. So you look at something like a cassoulet, a classic French dish where you've got things like pork belly and pork sausage and duck and all these things. You mentioned one pot. If that isn't the best one pot one to go around, then I'm not here.
Yeah. One pot over 3 days.
Yeah, but nonetheless, but those beans will take on all of those flavours and become an integral part of that dish. I would say to you that in my home cooking, I would use chickpeas, cannellini beans, lentils at least twice a week. Also because they're filling and they're healthy, and they're easy to manage, easy to cook. You can do a lot with them. A lot of people, you'll see recipes for, there's a million recipes for something like hummus using chickpeas, and that's fine, but cook your chickpeas and cook them correctly, and then pan fry them in olive oil with garlic and chili until they pop, and you get this crust on the outer surface. It's like somewhere cross between it's like creamy popcorn.
Right, I think we need a video on that, Paul. That sounds amazing. I don't think I've ever had it that way.
Yeah, really good.
Okay. And does your 3-year-old like it? Or is it
Not a
too
big
strong
fan.
for you?
Not a big fan of the chili, but he's got his own tastes. They're developing, working on it.
But that sounds amazing. And again, like with rice, if you're cooking them and you've got the flavours, when do you add in the other vegetables, the onions, the carrot and so on that might go with the lentils or the legumes?
Again, it depends on what the vegetable is. The size that you cut the vegetable will also make a difference. So there's and I mean, I know I refer to a lot of sort of French stuff, but that's kind of my hitting zone. But there's a very famous sort of side dish called lentils du pois. So they're pois lentils, but it's not just lentils. And the reason pois lentils are so highly regarded around the world is they keep their shape over long cooking periods, but they also have their own particular flavour. And they will generally be done with, let's say, a very fine dice of carrot and shallot, and there's garlic and tarragon and various herbs and things. And all of those things are generally cooked as, can be cooked with the lentil, but generally, because something like a lentil or a chickpea, you're talking probably about a good 20 minutes. I mean, I'm paraphrasing massively because each bean will be different, but, let's say 20 minutes. I don't want to cook a finely diced carrot for 20 minutes. So it depends on what you add. Things like that, probably the best rule of thumb is if you get a hard root vegetable like a carrot or a celeriac or a potato or a parsnip or something like that, even a beetroot that's a hard root vegetable, if you cut it the same size as whatever it is, the legume that you're cooking, it will essentially take probably about the same amount of time to cook. So yes, you could throw everything into a one pot and cook it all together. Are you going to benefit from it? Well, yeah, it depends. I mean, I like to cook things like lentils and strain off all the water and get rid of it because it will have some grit in there, it will have some dirt, you get a bit of sort of scum on the top. I like to get rid of all of that and just have the lentils themselves and then dress the lentils and add things to it later. It's similar with rice too. I like to add things after and cook things separately. Yeah, I might use an extra pan or an oven tray or a pot or something like that, but I concentrate on cooking a ingredient correctly and then other ingredients to go with said a ingredient, and I'll cook them separately because I want each part of it to be as good as it could be. As soon as you add onion, carrots, whatever it is in your rice, you change what's happening inside a pot, pan, dish. You change the environment, you change the way the grains are working with the water, you change everything that's happening in there, and therefore you're going to change the consistency of the cooking of your rice or legume or whatever it might be. So I'll generally tend to cook things separately to whatever it is the main component of, let's say, the dish. Let's say lentils du pois. I'll cook the lentils separately to everything else. I might add a few bay leaves, a bit of thyme to perfume them, but the actual other components of the dish will go as a separate part.
Well, then to finish this one off, can we talk a little bit about stock? Because we ran out of, because for rice and for chickpeas and all sorts of legumes.
This is a good story. Listen to this.
We had run out of stock at home, our chicken stock and vegetable stock that I normally have in our pantry. But we did have some beef stock, and I thought, how wrong could it be? So I was making risotto for Dougie and I for lunch, and I had no idea to be just so wrong. And I just thought stock was stock. Why isn't stock, Paul?
Well, it depends on the stock, firstly. And we're talking about not homemade stock here. We're talking about packet liquid stock.
Well, the brand said homemade stock.
No, okay. So, you did.
It was made in someone's home, wasn't it?
You didn't produce the stock yourself.
No, I didn't produce the stock.
So why was it such an epic failure? There are various reasons. A lot of it will have to do with the stock itself. I mean, essentially for me, there are two versions of stock. There is what we call a light stock, and there is a dark stock, or a brown stock and a white stock. That's probably more common. So white stocks are essentially bones and sometimes vegetables brought to the boil and simmered for a long time, straight up. So it's just bones, vegetables, herbs, bay leaves, all that sort of stuff. And it's brought to the boil and simmered for a long time. And then a brown stock is generally roasted bones, the same process. Okay, and by roasting the bones, what you do is you create colour, and colour equals flavour. So you have two different flavour profiles straight up. Now, packet stocks, from what I can tell, and I'm just as guilty as anyone who's buying them, using them, except I will not buy beef stock. Or I will buy chicken stock and vegetable stock. I won't buy fish stock, and I won't buy beef stock. Packet stocks, from what I can tell, and in the case of beef stock, I don't know if they're getting the colour of them because the colour is much darker, richer, deeper, because that's what you would expect when you go and buy beef stock. You think beef, you think dark.
Yeah, red.
Yeah,
brown,
brown, darker. And I don't know what it is that they're adding to get to that. Are they roasting the bones? I've got no idea. My suggestion to you would be that there is certainly probably a sugar content or a molasses content added. And so remember, when you are cooking with stock and you are effectively reducing that stock down when you are doing your beef stock risotto, which sounds gross anyway, but anyway, when you are doing your...
It didn't sound so bad at the time.
Beef stock risotto, you're essentially cooking that down and condensing that flavour. So you're reducing it. So like any stock, if you reduce it for long enough, the flavour intensifies. So you've intensified the flavour of things like probably some beef bones that I would hope are in there, but certainly a molasses content, certainly a salt content. There would be a massive salt content in there, and possibly a sugar content to get some colour, vinegar as well. So you've got all these other separate things which are going into the stock, which you are effectively reducing down and concentrating the flavour of, because that's what's happening, but all that is going into your rice. So whereas chicken stocks and packet chicken stocks, or packet vegetable stocks, and liquid stocks, not stock cubes, we won't even talk about those things, but liquid stocks, they're, from what I can tell, it's essentially no colour is added. So there's no molasses content, there's no food colour, there's no sugar, because then there's no expectation from the customer that a chicken stock should look that deep, dark, rich, golden brown colour of a roasted chicken, because everyone believes that chicken stock should be this sort of, creamy, not creamy, but, slightly opaque, off-white water. You know what I mean? So I think the reason that your failure came about was because of not so much your technique, but because of the ingredient that you used and what was put in there. I mean, if you had have turned around and got some raw beef bones, put them in a pot, brought them to the boil with maybe a bit of vegetable and a bit of this and, herbs and thyme and rosemary and garlic and da-da-da, you would essentially still have a beef stock, but it would look nothing like your chicken stock. It would have beef flavour. And would it have been better in your risotto? Absolutely.
Well, the result that we had was so bad, I'm not even sure I'm ready to test it out, Paul. But thanks for that. And thank you all for listening. And I hope you've got an idea now of when you're going to be cooking your rice and your chickpeas, legumes, lentils, and so on, how to look at processing them in the oven. And any questions, please keep in touch. Thanks for listening.
Thanks. Don't do it in beef stock.
Thanks for listening to this podcast as we explore home cooking in a modern world. We'd love you to subscribe, and for more information, please go to our website, cookingwithsteam.com.